Want to know what it costs to transform a dowdy country mistress into a future queen? Try millions of pounds in cosmetic surgery, designer wardrobes from Versace and Valentino, 3 royal residences worth over 200 million pounds, a fleet of chauffeur-driven Bentleys and Rolls-Royces, 24/7 bodyguard protection, and jewelry that once belonged to King Edward VII's mistress. All of it paid for by Prince Charles using money from the Duchy of Cornwall, technically taxpayer funds. This is the story of the most expensive makeover in royal history, a calculated public relations campaign to rebrand a woman the British public despised as the Rottweiler who destroyed Princess Diana. Her name is Camilla Parker Bowles, and she pulled off something that seemed impossible. She went from being the most hated woman in Britain to becoming Duchess of Cornwall and future princess consort. And she did it by letting Prince Charles bankroll every single aspect of her luxurious new life, while his 2 sons watched in horror as she literally moved into their dead mother's homes and took over her entire existence. Let's start with the physical transformation, because Camilla didn't just wake up one day looking like Duchess material. Expensive grooming, cosmetic dentistry, Botox injections, and rumors of a complete facelift changed her appearance dramatically. Dowdy country clothes that screamed hunting in Gloucestershire were banished and replaced by sleek designer outfits. Charles sent her to New York for professional makeovers and gave her an unlimited clothing allowance. Couture houses like Valentino and Versace, the same designers Diana wore, now dressed Camilla's more matronly figure. Her hairstylist revealed that for years, Camilla insisted on brushing out her own hair after salon visits, giving herself that dated 1970s look. But suddenly, that changed when she got worried about keeping her prince. The makeup improved. The hair became slicker, more polished, more professional. Photographers noticed she looked transformed, no lines around her eyes. Completely different woman. All of this cost a fortune, and Charles paid every penny. But the real expense wasn't the surgery or the clothes, it was the jewelry. At Charles's 50th birthday party, Camilla wore an aquamarine and diamond necklace that belonged to her great-grandmother, Alice Keppel, mistress of King Edward VII for 12 years. That's Charles's great-great-grandfather. Do you see the pattern? Charles is literally obsessed with repeating history. He went out of his way to find and buy back all the jewelry that King Edward VII gave to Alice Keppel and present it to Camilla. We're talking pieces worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. One diamond ring from the late Queen Mother's collection was valued at £500,000 alone. Charles showers Camilla with jewels constantly. She's become a very rich woman thanks to her royal lover. And here's the kicker. While Diana had to return all borrowed royal jewels after her death, Camilla gets to keep everything Charles gives her. So when he dies, she'll be vastly wealthy from jewelry alone. But that's nothing compared to the real estate portfolio Charles built for his mistress. Wait until you hear about the houses. Charles bought Camilla her own home called Ray Mill House after her divorce in 1995. It's smaller and less imposing than Highgrove Charles's country estate just a few miles away, but it's still a beautiful property on 17 acres. Charles paid to redecorate the entire house and maintains the gardens to exacting standards. Members of his close circle helped raise money for the mortgage, essentially bailing her out when she needed to buy it. But here's where it gets really obscene. Camilla doesn't just have her own house. She's also the chatelaine, that means lady of the house of 3 royal residences. Clarence House in London, worth £150 million. Highgrove in Gloucestershire, with its cherished gardens. And Birkhall on the Queen's Balmoral estate in Scotland. That's 4 properties total. And Charles pays for the upkeep, security systems, and running costs of all of them. Think about what that means. Camilla chose Highgrove for Charles, not the other way around. She picked it because it was convenient to her horses and close to the Beaufort Hunt where she liked to ride. Diana hated Highgrove specifically because it was Camilla's territory, too close to Camilla's friends, too near the hunting set that provided cover for Charles's affair. When the marriage deteriorated and Diana knew Highgrove was where Charles entertained Camilla, she metaphorically and literally shook the dust off her shoes when she left. After Diana's death, Camilla took over completely. She's now running 3 royal residences, overseeing refurbishments, reorganizing gardens, managing all the everyday business of Charles's palaces. She's a very powerful figure in that way. And although we don't see much of her in public, never underestimate the power she wields over both Charles and his entire staff. Here's the part that'll make your blood boil. When William and Harry moved into Clarence House after its refurbishment was complete, they found themselves living for the first time with their father's mistress. If that wasn't difficult enough, Camilla also imported her father, Major Bruce Shand. Suddenly, there were people they didn't really know terribly well sharing a roof with them. Both boys found it an extremely uncomfortable experience. They eventually moved back to their old apartments at St. James's Palace. They simply didn't want to be close to Camilla. Can you imagine? Your mother dies in a car crash, and 2 years later, your father moves his longtime mistress into your home, takes over your mother's residences, and expects you to call this woman family? But Charles didn't just give Camilla houses and jewelry. He gave her something even more valuable: protection and financial security for life. And the costs are staggering. Charles pays for everything in Camilla's life, and I mean everything. Her clothes, her running expenses, her car, 2 former police officers who act as her protection detail and chauffeur her everywhere, her security system at Ray Mill House. All her motoring costs after she had a minor accident in 1997 on winding roads leading to Highgrove. Her hunting hobby cost Charles around £45,000 a year. When she wanted to take luxurious holidays courtesy of wealthy friends with sumptuous villas and palatial yachts, those trips were free to Charles and Camilla. A Greek islands cruise on the mega yacht Alexander cost $90,000 a day. But Charles didn't pay a penny. His wealthy friends covered it as a favor. She's had access to the Royal Helicopter, 2 aircraft from the Royal Air Squadron, the Royal Train, a fleet of 8 chauffeur-driven limousines including 2 Bentleys, 3 Rolls-Royces, and 3 Daimlers. All of this at the Queen's discretion, using taxpayer-funded resources. But here's what really exposes the whole operation. Charles's courtiers owed allegiance to both him and his mistress. Mark Bolland, who later left for a media relations career, served Camilla directly. When she moved in, all of Charles's staff became extremely loyal to her too, because if they wanted to keep their jobs, they had to like it or lump it. Being a royal courtier is essentially a subservient position, where you bow to whoever the boss is sleeping with. Whatever they felt privately about Camilla replacing Diana, she was part of the management team now, and they had to work for her just as much as for Charles. It's a wonderful life for a woman who lives like a queen but has almost no duties except taking over Charles's splendid homes and spending his money. She's literally the best kept woman in Britain. And the public relations campaign to make all this acceptable? That cost a fortune too. Operation Camilla was a carefully orchestrated strategy by Charles's spin doctors to gain public acceptance for the couple. Strategic photo opportunities, like a walk through Green Park near Buckingham Palace. Front row seats at fashion shows like Stella McCartney's Chloe show in Paris, marking Camilla as a client with international prestige. Carefully staged charity appearances in Wiltshire home territory where they could guarantee friendly crowds. Her sister Annabelle Elliot came to see their fundraising attempts. One onlooker told the press it was nice to see them together. They deserved happiness. We can't all live in the past. Those quotes weren't accidents. They were the result of expensive PR manipulation. But there was one massive problem with this whole campaign. Camilla is terrible at the job, and no amount of money or PR spin could change that fundamental reality. The campaign to launch Camilla as a charity queen had to proceed with extreme caution because she's genuinely bad at royal duties. Her biographer, Christopher Wilson, described it perfectly. She's great one-to-one, but she's no good with crowds. The difficulty is that Camilla is uneasy in the presence of the British public. Diana had a wonderful magnetic charm that made everybody feel better once they'd met her, which made her an absolute natural on the charity circuit, raising money and awareness. Camilla doesn't have that common touch at all. She stayed away from the one vehicle that could bring her into contact with the British public and allow them to assess whether she's worthy of their support. So instead of doing real charity work, she took on limited, low-key engagements where she couldn't fail. In 1997, she became patron of the National Osteoporosis Society because her mother had died from the bone-thinning disease. It was personal and safe. No one could criticize her for that. She posed with British celebrities to raise the charity's profile, which also enhanced her own image. She became president in 2001. Her self-assurance grew as she took on more engagements. By 2002, she was attending book launches and making speeches about her mother's suffering. She even went to the World Congress on Osteoporosis in Lisbon, opened by Queen Rania of Jordan, where she sat confidently at a round table of international women leaders. She was beginning to perform like a royal, but only in extremely controlled situations where the public couldn't get close enough to reject her. Because that was the real fear. If Camilla took on more charity work, she might be accused of trying to follow in Diana's footsteps, and comparisons between them were brutal for Camilla. Think about it. Diana held dying AIDS patients when the world still feared touching them. She walked through active minefields. She visited leper colonies. She brought genuine compassion to every cause because she knew what it felt like to be rejected and hurting. Camilla's charity work? A bit of help for the Osteoporosis Society. That's it. The British press had a wonderful time making jokes about how she didn't quite carry it off. Glamour gowns that looked stunning on tall, slim, elegant Diana looked ridiculous on Camilla's more matronly figure. She felt uncomfortable wearing designer clothes, which is why she became such a figure of fun. She tried harder with makeup and hair because she was worried about hanging on to her prince, but it was never enough. You can't buy charisma with Botox and designer handbags. And the one group that saw through the whole charade better than anyone were the two people who mattered most, William and Harry. Their reaction to their father's mistress moving into their lives was about to create a crisis that no amount of PR could fix. Harry was absolutely devastated that Camilla walked in and took over Diana's home, Diana's man, Diana's lifestyle, Diana's everything. She stepped straight into a dead woman's shoes, and Harry, the baby of the family, who was much closer to his mother than William, bitterly resented it. William seemed more diplomatic and conciliatory, probably because he'd been away at university for 4 years and hadn't had to deal with Camilla much. He took the attitude of, if it makes you happy, Dad, fine. But Harry was unforgiving and not ready to accept Camilla in his life whatsoever. They both always felt uncomfortable in her presence. The fact that they moved out of Clarence House and back to St. James's Palace says everything you need to know. They simply didn't want to be close to her. The situation got even more complicated when Camilla's own children entered the picture. Tom Parker Bowles was so embarrassed by other boys teasing him about his mother's affair that he changed his surname to just Bowles. He also turned to drugs and was caught out amid massive publicity. Charles had to distance himself and his sons from Camilla's druggy son. Not a good look for the future king. One of Charles and Camilla's friends, Emily Van Cutsum, actually fell out with them over Tom's influence on William and Harry. At a dinner party, the Van Cutsums warned Charles that the boys were mixing with Tom, who'd been taking drugs, calling him a bad influence. When that conversation got back to Camilla, she struck back by making nasty comments about the Van Cutsum children. The feud exploded publicly when the Van Cutsum's son Edward married Lady Tamara Grosvenor, daughter of the Duke of Westminster. The Queen attended the wedding, which added royal prestige and rigid protocol. Because of Camilla's status as a mistress, she had to be seated away from the royal family, not just away from Charles, but over on the other side of the church, somewhere at the back. Nobody had the courtesy to tell her this beforehand. She read about it in the papers. Charles faced a dilemma. If he attended, Camilla would be publicly snubbed. If he stayed away, he'd be accused of letting down the bridal couple. It became the War of the Wedding, and Camilla won. For the first time, Charles actually stood up for her and found a good reason not to attend. But this revealed a fundamental problem. Charles seems to have learned nothing about public relations or damage limitation. He doesn't know how to see problems coming and take avoiding action. The royal machinery simply doesn't work properly with Camilla in it. And the one person who saw this disaster clearly was the woman who mattered most, Queen Elizabeth herself. The Queen has maintained a very large distance between herself and Camilla from day one, and she's never wavered. During the Golden Jubilee celebrations in 2002, an open-air pop concert was held in Buckingham Palace Gardens. Most of the royal family attended. Camilla sat in the row behind the princes with her friends, carefully positioned away from the Queen, who simply ignored her. When Camilla's friend Angus Ogilvy died of cancer in 2004, Camilla was not allowed anywhere near the royal family at his funeral. The message was crystal clear. The Queen does not accept Camilla Parker Bowles, and that is a massive problem for the future of the monarchy. Over the last 3 or 4 years before the wedding, the Queen was snookered more than once, pushed by Charles and his courtiers into doing things she would have preferred not to do. But she drew the line at certain things, and Buckingham Palace balcony appearances were one of them. Here's why the Queen's position matters so much. She has her own constituency to answer to the right-minded people of Britain who believe in morality and not in adultery. She wants to represent those people. More than that, she has her eye on history. She believes she's now contending with Queen Victoria to be the greatest sovereign Britain has ever had. She doesn't want anything to taint that legacy when it's written. By involving herself with Camilla Parker Bowles, there can only be downside for her reputation, so the Queen will always maintain distance. Despite Charles's complicated and expensive attempts to manipulate the media in Camilla's favor, people don't regard her as someone they want to see on the Buckingham Palace balcony one day. They may never think she's suitable. And until then, the Queen is wise to leave her own views tantalizingly unspecific while making her disapproval obvious through actions rather than words. But Charles told his mother that Camilla is the one non-negotiable area of his life. He made public appearances with her, which put the Queen in impossible positions. He forced her hand repeatedly, steamrolling through opposition to achieve his goal of marrying Camilla regardless of the consequences to the monarchy. And that brings us to the constitutional crisis that erupted when they finally announced their engagement in February 2005. The problems weren't just about public opinion or the Queen's disapproval. They were about fundamental questions of law, religion, and whether Charles was even legally allowed to marry Camilla in a civil ceremony. The answers to those questions would shake the very foundations of British constitutional monarchy and expose just how far Charles was willing to go to legitimize his mistress. But first, let's talk about what happened to the woman who stood in Camilla's way. Princess Diana. Diana privately nicknamed Camilla the Rottweiler. Camilla called Diana Barbie after the doll. Everyone in royal circles knew Charles and Diana lived separate lives, but they maintained the public facade until Diana decided to fight back. The turning point came at a birthday party hosted by Lady Annabel Goldsmith at Ormley Lodge. Charles didn't expect Diana to attend, but she did. He was appalled that the two women in his life were going to meet. All his worst nightmares came true when Camilla and Charles nipped off together for a private conversation away from the main party. Within about an hour, Diana realized both Charles and Camilla had disappeared. Her bodyguard, Ken Worf, recalled her distress. "I can't find the Prince of Wales. I can't see Camilla either." Diana raced downstairs, confronted Camilla face to face, and said, "Leave my husband alone." It was the only time during her entire marriage that Diana was able to confront Camilla directly and tell her to keep away from her husband. It must have been a wonderfully triumphant moment. But ultimately, Diana lost the war. After their separation in December 1992, Camilla took over every aspect of Charles's private life. She became his mother, his nanny, his nurse, His mistress? Someone who treated him like a little boy, which is apparently what he wanted. She must have been great in bed with him and looked after him exceptionally well in that department. She did everything for Charles and didn't ask for much in return. She didn't even ask him to marry her. He eventually proposed because he had to after going so far down the Camilla road. When Diana died in August 1997, the path was finally clear. 3 years later, Charles got his mother to meet Camilla at a party at Highgrove. The Queen didn't want to do it, but Charles said if she didn't, he wouldn't come to the Queen Mother's 100th birthday. The Queen was forced to choose between seeing her grandson or making a stand. She chose pragmatism. The long shadow of Diana reaches over everything Charles and Camilla do. When Camilla got divorced from Andrew Parker Bowles in early 1995, it was 100% Charles's fault. It would never have happened if Charles hadn't humiliated Andrew by admitting adultery on television. 3 days later, that's how fast it happened. Andrew said the divorce had to go ahead. He behaved very well, became the guilty party in old-fashioned style, and took all the blame. But Charles's televised admission didn't just cuckold his friend in front of the entire world. It also violated the British Army's absolute rule that you never have an affair with a fellow officer's wife. Charles was essentially saying, I've been sleeping with my brother, officer's wife, for years, which is completely unacceptable in military culture. Andrew retired from the army and remarried, his second wife Rose taking Camilla's place at society events like Ascot. The divorce cleared the way for Camilla's second marriage, but creating the constitutional framework to make that marriage legal would prove to be Charles's biggest challenge yet. The wedding announcement in February 2005 created immediate constitutional crises. Originally, they planned to marry at Windsor Castle's St. George's Chapel, but a legal technicality emerged. If they opened the castle for Charles's wedding, they'd have to allow ordinary citizens to marry there too for the next 3 years. The Queen was horrified at the thought of her weekend retreat being invaded by commoners getting married. So they switched to a civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall, a municipal register office. But here's the problem. Various laws, dating back to 1836, appear to prevent royal family members from having civil marriages. Charles's advisors claimed human rights legislation overturned those previous laws, but it was never tested in court. That means historians might eventually declare Charles's marriage illegal, his wife not truly his spouse, and any inheritance rights questionable. The monarchy was gambling with constitutional legitimacy because Charles couldn't control his personal desires. The Church of England had its own crisis over this. Charles will eventually be supreme governor of the church, which officially opposes divorce and remarriage. The evangelical wing believed Charles was beyond the pale and could never hold any responsible church role. The pragmatist wing wanted the problem solved. In the end, the pragmatists won with a compromise: civil ceremony, followed by a church blessing. But the Queen wouldn't attend the civil ceremony, only the blessing afterward. Her absence spoke volumes. When Charles and Camilla finally posed for engagement photos at Windsor Castle, Camilla wore that £500,000 diamond ring from the Queen Mother's collection. A reporter asked if he got down on one knee to propose. Camilla joked, of course, and everyone laughed awkwardly. But nobody was laughing about the fundamental question hanging over everything. What happens when Charles becomes king? The plan is for Camilla to be called Duchess of Cornwall while the Queen is alive, then Princess Consort when Charles becomes king. But here's the constitutional reality. The wife of a king automatically becomes queen. That's the law of the land in Britain. A woman takes on the rights and titles of her husband. So either they'll have to change centuries of constitutional law, or Camilla will become queen consort, despite palace claims otherwise. The British public are ready to forget, but not ready to forgive. They'll always eye Camilla with suspicion and lingering disregard. She'll never be a darling of the people like Diana was. There's too much against her. But Charles has gone so far down the Camilla road, created so much misery for the monarchy and his children, that he can't turn back now. He's made his bed and has to lie in it. Edward VIII abdicated for divorced American Wallis Simpson in 1936. Charles pursued a high-risk strategy to keep both the throne and the woman he loves. The Queen believes the monarchy is only as strong as its weakest link, and right now Charles certainly looks like the weakest link. He sacrificed everything: duty, dignity, his son's happiness, public support, all for Camilla. This is the unlikely story of a woman who won a prince against all odds by letting him pay for absolutely everything while she took over a dead woman's life. So here's my final question for you. Knowing that Charles spent millions of taxpayer pounds to transform his mistress into a duchess, bought her multiple homes, paid for her entire lifestyle, and forced his grieving sons to accept her just years after their mother died, do you think Camilla deserves to become queen consort? Should a woman who destroyed Britain's fairy tale princess get to wear a crown bought with public money? Drop your honest opinion in the comments. I want to hear what you really think. And if this video exposed the calculated financial manipulation behind Camilla's royal makeover, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who still thinks this love story is romantic rather than transactional. Because the numbers don't lie. This is the most expensive mistress-to-wife transformation in modern history, and British taxpayers funded every penny of it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, where we dig even deeper into royal scandals they're desperately trying to bury.